Very good. It's 1 o'clock, so we'll begin the EDIC meeting for today. First of all, thank everybody for coming. It's a little bit inclement weather out there, and so thank you for attending. We do have a quorum, and we have a few items on the agenda. Number one is to approve the EDIC meeting minutes of 9/23/25, and they were in our packet. They're in front of us if there are any changes or corrections. Otherwise, we will accept a motion.
Move to approve.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any other comments, changes, or corrections? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Number two, Central at the Horizon, and that's pages 4 through 35 in our packet, and Jim Gilmore will get us started. Jim.
Okay, I'm going to start off by giving you some updates on this from the North Dakota Housing Finance Agency. This morning they reported to the Industrial Commission that they had funded 7 projects statewide with low-income housing tax credits and other housing funds, and it includes the Central on Horizon. It includes 2 additional ones in Fargo. The other ones in Fargo will be a housing authority project on 25th Avenue South. That will be funded with these 9% low-income housing tax credits, and another elderly project by Beyond Shelter that's at 64th Avenue South, and you had approved a pilot incentive for that a year ago, and then they're simply reapplying. The Housing Authority will be applying in the future because they'll need that pilot also to make that feasible. But the third one is the Central on Horizon. So, you know, it seems like all the funding is in place except for the payment in lieu of taxes. So it's, I just kind of brought this memo that the Housing Authorities, you know, sent out, and so we'll just want to let you know that that funding from the state was assured this morning when they reported that to the Industrial Commission. I've got several questions about, you know, who exactly does this, you know, serve as far as loading right. This is the income limits that they would have to comply with for different household sizes. So the income limits are higher than what you'll see in a Beyond Shelter project or a Housing Authority project. It really fits as more of a moderate income, a workforce housing. I think still a need in our community, but it's a little different. And that's one of the reasons we had our financial advisor take a look at it, and his reports in there that they had that this wouldn't be feasible without these incentives. So at this point, this is the site, and I think I'll have David come up now and introduce himself. I'll have you come up here and just kind of walk through this project, what your goal is, what you think the market is for this, and who this. Again, I kind of already touched on who it's served, but David.
Hello, my name is David Westner. I work for the NX Group. I'm the VP of Development. Just a little bit of a background on our company. We're based in Indianapolis, Indiana, actually a suburb right outside Indianapolis. I'm personally located in Denver, Colorado. We have a few offices around the country. And just so you guys are aware, we really specialize in doing these 4% low-income housing tax credit projects around the country. We're active in about 20 different states, doing financing projects very, very similar to this one. A little bit of a background of why this site makes sense, what made us attracted to come to Fargo. We really like and specialize in Midwestern and Great Plains states. We have several projects in Iowa, Nebraska, Minnesota, Wisconsin, and so expanding into North Dakota felt like a natural sort of expansion of our efforts. We think that there's a really strong need in a lot of those markets for multifamily, workforce, affordable housing, and think that this project makes a lot of sense. The site is located in a qualified census tract, and obviously has been zoned for high density development by you guys at the city. So we view this as sort of a natural project and type to be able to meet the needs of your community. Obviously, when we started to look into the sort of metrics and what Fargo was doing. We were really impressed with all of the strong market rate development that's occurred here over the last 5 to 10 years, obviously with a pilot and tax incentive being a piece of that. We have been approved for the Renaissance Zone incentive for the first 5 years and are requesting the 15-year pilot in order to help keep this project moving forward. We do receive a tax incentive of usually 20 years on every project that we do. I don't think we've closed on a project over the last 10 years that has not had a tax incentive. So just want to, obviously hope that you guys take this project for the merits of itself, but just want to let you know that that is a really important piece of our capital stack, really important piece to be able to help this project move forward. Definitely want to be able to, answer any questions. I guess we have the project pulled up here, can kind of show what we're looking at. Full parking on the first floor with some amenity space along the southern edge. We are really hoping to target and have space for families, not just, higher mid-income professionals, but we hope that this will allow families to have an accessible and good place to live in downtown Fargo. We will then above that have 4 stories of residential and have this is the stacking plan, so four stories of residential above a first floor garage, various different unit types, and then down here at the bottom have some renderings of what the project would look like. We do pride ourselves in providing a heavy number of 2 and 3 bedroom units, which we view as differentiating ourselves. We don't do any studios, all 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms to help hopefully meet the needs of the community here in Fargo. So I could talk all day about the project, but would love to be able to answer any questions that you guys have, and we're excited to be able to move forward with this one.
I should check now and see, Matt Schnacklenberg, are you online, and do you want to give your summary of the report, your financial report? Guess we didn't get him.
If he isn't joined us, Jim, if you don't mind, I'll ask a couple questions, and if anybody else has any. So it's a 4%, and can you talk a little bit about, and maybe Jim can help with that, there's different breakdowns with the different participation, and also talk about the state, what they are participating in so far, if you don't mind.
Yeah, so we are receiving, and actually just officially this morning received the 4% credits from their affiliate. The state is the one that sends out the 4% credits, but those are federal tax credits, so offsetting federal taxes. And then we have also been awarded $3 million of the housing incentive fund from the state of North Dakota as well.
You should know, you probably don't see many 4% projects. There's actually no limit on the number of, or it's a very high limit on the number of credits that are available statewide. And so, unfortunately, they don't get used. One of the reasons they don't get used is they help provide maybe 35% of the cost of a project, and so it becomes very difficult to, provide the rest. And so, the Annex Group has experience using these non-competitive, credits, bringing in other resources to make this project feasible.
Can I ask just one more then? When you talked about the affordable housing, but it's more workforce, is it like with Beyond Shelter, they have to evaluate the income of each individual? Is it the same situation, or is it different?
Yeah, no, it's the same situation. So 100% of our units will be at 60% area median income. So that is both a rent test as well as an income test. So every resident, the incomes that Jim put up earlier, will be testing depending on the household size and make sure that they're below 60% area median income. And then the rents are going to be limited at 30% of that 60% area median income, which is considered housing burdened.
Very good. Any other questions, or anybody else? And if you don't mind, if nobody else has one, so can you talk, and this is kind of separate from the project, but the land, it had to sit for a while because back in the day, it had some other issues, and can you kind of give a summary of that, if you don't mind?
Yeah, for sure. So we have been working closely with the seller group as well as the environmental covenant that's on the land. Xcel Energy went through an extensive remediation situation in 2018, I think is when it started. They now have a full approved remediation from the state with those environmental covenants. Our plan is to work with the state, and we've already talked with them as well as the same environmental consultant who worked with Excel to make sure that we meet all of the requirements of the environmental covenant. We will not be going deeper. There's currently a 5-foot clean cap on the site. We will not be going any deeper than that 5-foot cap, and we will maintain a 5-foot clean cap on the site. Then we will be building the podium, which will be, obviously 10, 11, 12 feet of concrete, and all residential will be on top of that, along with a active radon system. So we're taking all of the necessary steps to make sure that we meet the qualifications of development on the site.
So, and this is my question for Jim. So basically this, and I don't remember the history, but back in the day when Fargo first started, this was kind of the site of a coal?
It was a coal gasification plant where they would somehow turn coal into natural gas. And so when the city started to reconstruct NP and some other streets in the area, they just discovered this had kind of leached out to the area. And then Excel stepped in, acquired an apartment building that was on the site and demolished that. And as David noted, dug down and put a cap down and hauled out truckload after truckload of contaminated soil.
So that was done, but so there will be continual monitoring. That's kind of the plan, basically. But my question is, sometimes we, as a city, give incentives for restoring some of that, but that is not going to. That isn't what's taking place. Do you know what I mean? Where we give different incentives when you have issues like that?
Yeah, I mean, in the past, the city's given incentives for environmental cleanup. In this case, Excel cleaned it up on their own. They're the ones that had, created the issue, decades ago. And so, yeah, this is a relatively, clean site, not 100, at least down 5 feet. It makes it more difficult to develop, which I think gets into their financing. What we're looking at here with the pilot is, could they do this without the pilot? And I think the answer from PFM is no, they really can't. And I had a question on the rents. When you mentioned a 30% rent, if someone's income is a little lower, can you only charge 30% of the rent, or do they still have to pay what that market rent is?
Yeah, so all of the rents are capped at the 30% of the 60% area median income. So there is a annual HUD releases every year what the maximum rents can be. We then subtract, if we'll have tenants pay their own utilities, so then we subtract a utility allowance from that rent. Now internally, obviously, if that amount is higher than what's considered market, then we, can only charge whatever market is. So we're not going to be charging more than what a market price for a project is. I will say also, if somebody, we are required to take vouchers on the project, with it being a low-income housing tax credit project. So we'll work with the Fargo Housing Authority to make sure that we're accepting vouchers on the project.
Did the mayor have one? No, you're going. Okay, I'll defer to the mayor. We got the tale of two Davids here, by the way, so that's kind of fun. I hope that, are you going to come up and talk here, David, too, or no?
I don't have any value to
Nothing to say, got it. Funny enough, I bumped into David, the developer David, at the coffee shop and got a good rundown of this. And so if you wouldn't mind, very comprehensive overview of the financials of the project, giving us a little bit of an overview there of kind of what we discussed?
Yeah, sure. So, without getting too in the weeds and putting everybody to sleep, basically, I'll try to explain kind of how the financing structure works. As Jim mentioned, we're using 4% low-income housing tax credits on the project. What those functionally do is, for every eligible cost that we have, which is our hard costs, our soft costs, our developer fee, not the land, but most of the costs are considered eligible costs, we then have generated tax credits that become the equity in the project. Like Jim said, that's about usually between 30 and 40% of the total capital stack. We then have to make up the rest. That's primarily done with a loan, so a permanent loan that's backed by tax-exempt bonds from the state. And so we are that'll make up another 40 or so percent of the project. Then something that we do is we take a deferred developer fee. So something that we were discussing earlier is the overall cost for this project might look more inflated or high than what you might see for a market rate project on that. There's a few reasons for that. One is there are severe bond and legal costs that go along with just doing these transactions, which is unfortunate, and we wish we didn't have to pay. The other thing that I would say is we take a very large chunk of the developer fee and we reinvest it into the deal and then pay it off through the lifespan of the project. So the reason for doing that is, and North Dakota at the state level, they understand that the larger they allow the base developer fee to be, the more tax credits we receive from the federal government. And then we put that money back into the sources of the project. So it's sort of a cycle of funds that allows us to generate more tax credit equity while also just paying that off through the course of the project. So it's not us receiving any more money than we would otherwise, but it is a way of generating more equity for the project. So that is, and I can get into the weeds and would love to have a conversation if anybody wants to kind of look at that at an individual level, but that is the reason why you might see a higher cost per unit than you would be used to for a normal project. So that's part of the equation. Anything else that from our conversation?
So just so that kind of we're all aware, because these types of projects have come before the committee before, as we discussed, and I think the real question that I have had continually, which you help shed light on, is if you're looking at this at a per door cost, which is kind of my general rule of thumb, thinking about how much this costs in our community. Well, we just had a Beyond Shelter one come across the desk that was around $290, could have been $300. That's off the top of my head, so don't fact check me on the exact number. This one's at around $360 a door. And so when, the gut check on that would be, we have developers coming in, and obviously this has been signed off by the state, signed off by the federal government, all that's great. Mm-hmm. It's just hard to understand where that inflation really comes from.
Yeah.
And so your firm gets development fees for creating the deal, for doing the deal. Then you get additional general contractor fees for executing the construction of the deal. And then you get other project management fees. And that, so where does it all shed, just like to and from the firm, and how do the financials on that work?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, we have a developer fee that we receive, most of which we put back into the project, but there is some that is paid both at closing, C of O, and then conversion of the project. And then we, as you mentioned, are our own general contractor as well as property management company. Mm-hmm. So there are fees that come from that. Now, occasionally, if there's a cost benefit to using a local general contractor or a different property management company, we outsource that somewhat frequently. But we find that utilizing our internal group helps us maintain control across our portfolio. We also then, as you mentioned, once we pay off the loan, once we pay off the housing incentive fund from the state, there's an annual payment that goes along with that. Mm-hmm. And then once we pay off our asset management fees to our investor, we then receive the cash flow, the annual cash flow from the project.
And do you know, so for example, typical general contractor fees, depending on the type of deal you're doing, is going to be 5-6%? I mean, do you have a rough estimation of what those fees that you guys charge are within the pro forma?
Yeah, so it's standard within the North Dakota
aligned with
QAP.
all that. Yeah.
So it's a 6-2-6 structure. So that's
okay.
General conditions, overhead, profit, and then a 5% contingency.
Got it.
If you look on page 6 of the PFM report, what they've done there is kind of outline the costs that are kind of unusual for this project. So you've got this deferred developer fee of $14 million, other bond fees, construction bond interest. That are things that are kind of above what you would find on a typical market project. So when you remove all those costs, the cost per unit is about $250,000, and given the more 2 and sometimes 3 bedrooms, that's probably typical of what we've seen in some of the other TIF projects that the city's done. So that's why that cost gets up so high. But PFM also said this structure is very typical in other low-income housing projects that they've evaluated. So there's kind of nothing unusual here in terms of what fees are in this type of project.
100%, yeah. And for the record, I don't think that there's anything unusual in terms of being in alignment with this type of project. I just think and again, I told David this when we were at the coffee shop. I think this is a federal project that us at this committee is not going to be able to do anything about what these federal guidelines are. They're kind of just what it is. Like, we're not going to change that. But you see these things, like the things that kind of stick out at me would be things like the architect fee, which I talked to David. Usually that's around 1% of hard costs. This is at like 1.8%. I know I'm making everybody fall asleep here. But the reality of this, as far as I'm concerned, is, is it beneficial for us to give this incentive based on what the taxpayers of Fargo want? I think very likely it is. And then what's is the location the proper area for this type of housing? After all of that, the difference in like the financial piece that I've been harping on, there's really not that much we can do given that it's in alignment with all these federal mandates. So those are the two questions that I would volley up.
Go ahead, Mayor.
I just had a question. Your rent on one bedroom is $1,170. When you're doing this math back and forth at 60% and 30%, what actually is the renter paying?
Yeah, that's so, and actually, as I mentioned earlier, the numbers are based on the annual area median income, and we're projecting the 2026 incomes in Fargo to go down by 0.5%. So those numbers are based on the 2025. So it'll actually be 0.5% lower than that, but that rent is correct.
So it is 1,170?
It'll be closer to 1,100 when we're.
And then a monthly pet fee of $420?
That is the totality of all of the monthly pet fees. So not just one renter, but what we're assuming for the whole project. So if you had, what was the number? 200?
420.
Yeah, so that would be if there were 50 people with pets, it would all go towards that 420, not per.
So the individual wouldn't pay that high?
It would be like $10, I think, or $15.
I think the mayor was concerned if he just had one dog and he had to pay $420.
Yeah.
I was getting nervous there.
No, it's. I think we're generally about a $10 or $15 per month per pet fee. Yeah.
So to answer the question, in downtown Fargo, we need housing for people that are in a capacity that might be working in the downtown and doing different servers, different people that we have. We've always said we want to have. This is a kind of bigger than we ever thought. To get 262 units is really a lot of units, so that would add a lot to us. But I think you're really going to the point is when we get a federal program, it doesn't all seem to make sense. There's
Yeah, the
tax
numbers.
credits,
Yeah.
there's pilot, there's all these crazy things. But if they didn't get all those things, they wouldn't build. So this is a developer that goes around the country and grabs the federal programs.
Yeah, and I'll point out just briefly too. I think that the financial report that you guys ordered, that they did a really good job of. And actually, he called me and talked on the phone for a while to make sure that he had a clear understanding of where we were coming from. Obviously, it was a third-party report that the city ordered, but I thought he did a really good job of summarizing the different points of what makes these projects challenging.
And if John Cosgrove goes for it, then I'm okay.
The one question that I had is, it sounds like you do business in 20 different states. Obviously, all cities are probably looking at affordable housing. Can you tell us why you chose Fargo?
Yeah, we're doing not just a project in Fargo, but a lot of other places right now too, and really when we're looking at what makes sense, there's really some very large affordable housing developers that target super major metros, really high growth areas, Phoenix, Atlanta, everywhere in Texas, are very popular right now, and we, being especially from Indiana, really think that the Great Plains Midwestern region is an area that has a desperate need for housing, for new housing, and is sort of an area that is often overlooked by kind of at the national scene. So we've had North Dakota and Fargo specifically kind of in our sights for a while to kind of navigate. Okay, is this something that'll work? It took kind of a perfect storm. I would say the density of getting 260 units. I would say the Housing Incentive Fund from the state of $3 million from that, your guys' really aggressive tax incentives, and then you've seen some pretty substantial area median income growth over the last couple of years that finally made a project financially feasible. So I would say kind of a combination of all those things. I've probably been looking at Fargo for a potential project for 5 years, and finally kind of some things came together for it to make sense. So.
Okay, that's great background. Thanks.
Across your portfolio, do you generally keep the properties for the full 20 years of the incentives that you look for at the outset?
Yeah, we will hold the project long-term, foreseeing any unforeknown circumstances. But yeah, that really with the way that the tax credit program works, we don't have any direct equity in the project. It's a federal tax credit equity. So selling the project doesn't yield any benefit to us as an owner until the full tax credit period wears off.
David, does the state require this to be that affordable for 30 years or just the 20?
Yeah, I need to go back because so at a baseline it's 15. Now that we've been awarded the HIF this morning, there are some pieces of that'll be part of the negotiation. So it'll be somewhere between 15 and 30, and I can get back to you guys on what that number will be.
Very good. Any other questions? If there aren't any other questions, is anyone willing to make the motion?
Move to approve.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any other further discussion? Any other hesitation? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you very much. And now we'll move on to number 3, the Cass County Tax Incentive Policy. That's 36 and 38 in our booklet, and Jim Gilmore will get us started with that.
I don't have this up on the screen, but you can kind of see the policy. I think they're focused on primary sector. They seem to be very supportive of that. They recognize that they really encourage cities to try to limit them to 5 years, but I think they'd be supportive for 10. They indicate they're going to be supportive of these low-income housing projects, and so that was a positive thing to see because there's been a few in the past that they have not supported. I think the ones where, and maybe Robert, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like the ones that are more the TIF ones that aren't primary sector, are not low-income housing, or the pilot, they're only going to participate at 50% of what the city does. Is that, am I interpreting that right, Robert?
Yeah, I think the general intent and scope, I guess, is where I would start the conversation is among the commission was really a recognition that particularly with the property tax caps enacted with this year, that the board really wanted to just really tighten down what they were going to approve overall. And as you mentioned, recognizing the low-income housing need and stipulating the participation for low-income housing tax credits, and primary sector with the driver, the overall economic driver that represents. Those were really going to be, I guess I would say, the heart of the policy, and other types of incentives that have been common both to Fargo, West Fargo. We get a few out of Castleton. Then coming to the county, the board was just going to be really much more restrictive looking at those moving forward, and wanted to make that abundantly clear in the policy, and that's why we have that before you. Again, another just a procedural tweak, as well as that we were going to want to look at them prior to the initiating agency taking a look at as well, and that times up well for this project. So, and I guess that would be the kind of the county summary of our the position that was expressed in the updated policy. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I think one thing the city here might want to bring up later is just the Renaissance Zone. Right now, we just have a 5-year Renaissance Zone, so the county doesn't weigh in. But the state law allows you to go 8 years, and so I don't know if they're going to have a policy on whether or not they're going to support an 8-year Renaissance zone. They did for Castleton, and so we're hoping they do the same for Fargo, but we're not so sure.
Go ahead, Mayor.
Well, I mean, it says in the policy here, Jim, it's only 5 years, right? As I see it. Robert, I was just curious on this one that we just went through, and it's got a TIF and all the things it has. What will the county's position be on that?
Well, I guess I would say happy to represent the county policy. I don't generally get in the position of speaking for five county commissioners.
It's a
but-
low-income housing, and so to me, theoretically, that policy, it would okay with it, or?
I am looking at it the same way you are at this point. Again, if I have these conversations in advance of an item, I'm having them with the chair, and certainly not the full commission, so we don't get into a serial meeting situation. But I anticipate, because this does utilize the low-income housing tax credits, that this would be looked on favorably.
Well, I
And,
just asked that our chair, Dave, you'd converse with them when this comes up, because it's convoluted. Maybe Lucas can help out, but it's a complex financial issue that, thank you for pointing out cost per unit. It's higher than normal. There's a variety of different moving parts, but it's always these tax credits that gets us convoluted, so.
Go ahead, John.
Yeah, Robert, I had a question here, and we've always had trouble as these things move through the process, but this one significantly is saying Cass County will take the first look at these and set the tone. And I'm just wondering if everybody understands the commitment of the city often is going to be much more than that of the county. And what's happening here is kind of the public perception is, I think the county's trying to position itself. If the city, like the project we just looked at, is concerned about low-income housing and meeting that goal and is willing to make the commitment, the county doesn't want to be on the backside of that saying, no, we aren't going to do that. And so there's some gamesmanship here. And I think we just need to be aware that it seems very subtle, but it's very impactful.
I mean, I think this application for the housing project will be on the county's agenda on Monday, and so I think it's better for the city to know whether or not the county is, going to participate, because then we can kind of see the whole picture, and the school district would, I think that we'll find out from them. They're talking about creating a policy. I don't know if they're going to have one by the time this application comes to the city commission December 22nd, but I think it's better to try to get it done in first, because otherwise we're waiting. I've had cases where our city commission meets at 5 o'clock. County commission had a meeting at 3 o'clock, but now I got to wait a full 2 weeks because they want the city to go first.
Go ahead, Robert, if you have anything.
Just a point that, and Jim might know better than I do on this, but my recollection was right about the time that I came on board with the county, 2017, either prior to that or right at that time. Previous to that, county had wanted to look at the applications prior to the initiating entity. I might be incorrect in that. That's my recollection when I was still wide-eyed and brand new and getting used to everything. But that's my recollection.
You're right. Several of them, the county took action, first, and at some point, some of the commissioners said, no, we should wait and see what the city does before we decide.
No, and I appreciate sort of the complexities of it, but I appreciate in your letter, Robert, pointing that out. But I think it's an important change. Oftentimes the county and the city may have different goals and things they want to achieve, and so we want to understand kind of the whole process there. Excuse me, the other question I have is primary sector, and this has always been one where the definition is really difficult because actually, I can argue I could have a retail store that I sell most of my customers live outside of Fargo, West Fargo, and I'm primary sector. And so, and I know the state's worked on this, but that definition seems to wander at times, and I, would love to see something more definitive there than that.
I guess I would just simply point out that, Jim did a very nice job of pointing out to me that we had our choice of one of about 18 different definitions of primary sector that we could have used within the policy. So that conversation wasn't lost on us, but I appreciate the input.
Okay.
I think that's sometimes difficult. You may have an architecture firm based in Fargo that does most of its work outside of the city, yet clearly they compete with other architects in the community. And so, we've kind of looked at more, sometimes we're looking at more 70% outside of the state, or, if there's another architect in town, well, now that may not be fair, a different bank in town.
Any other comments or questions? I will give you a cautionary comment. So if we get to be too restrictive on tax incentives, then we won't have to worry about it because no one will be applying for them. And what's happened back in the day, when the city would approve it, the county and the school would automatically go along with it. And now what's happened is they've all been segmented. And so now the school district also is considering their own rules. And so like I said, then on top of that, you have political people that want to do away with incentives altogether. And I'm just telling you, if you do that, we can show you the facts of how well these incentives, they've actually reduced our property taxes by, I think, 5 mils, maybe more. And so we can show you the facts, but what happens is when you inject politics into this, then people start making it sound like something very bad. And this is a very powerful economic weapon that we've used, at least while I've been here and the mayor's been here. We can show you the facts. It's performed unbelievably well, and we've done a good job of being very disciplined. We do not overuse it because it's a very powerful tool. And if we eliminate it, which in effect, that's what we're doing now, we're starting to erode it. And if you eliminate it, what's going to happen is we are in competition every day with cities around the state, around the region, around the world. They'll just go someplace else. They'll go, I don't want to, this isn't worth my time. And so that's what will happen. And what will happen then is, you know what happens? Your property taxes go up. And that's what will happen. And then everyone will go, well, we didn't want that to happen. So that's my cautionary tale. I'm sorry for giving a sermon. But this is, we're seeing a gradual erosion, and if we're not careful, we are going to kill something that's very, very positive. So, thank you. Mr.
Well, just on that note, when we looked at need of housing, we need 16,000, 17,000 units in the community. Horace just passed an ordinance, if you look at that, which nobody will build. It's a 2-story apartment building, basically. So you're not going to get a 290 unit, you're going to get small units. And a lot of the other communities don't want apartments. So Fargo was tasked with taking the most of the apartment complexes. So if you don't figure out some low-income housing options, you're going to have a real difficult time with people living in Fargo that do a lot of the work in the community. So, Dave, it's a good precautionary thing. And to that point, I also think you need to work with the school board because I don't think they understand it. When Jim shows his stuff, for some reason, Robin Nelson went back to Mike Williams. And Jim, I don't know what Mike Williams had on our programs, but I think it'd be good that if you and Dave went over and went through the program, what we have, be helpful.
I've been trying to track the school board a little bit, and I don't know if Jackie's online or not, but they had, generally it's been their planning committee that's looked at the applications and have just always decided they're not going to comment. Now they're thinking about a policy, and they referred that to the governance committee, which referred it back to the planning committee. And so now it's back at the planning committee and directing their staff to kind of draft a policy. So certainly Dave
But
and
they
I,
better have input from this committee because
I know.
we're the committee that screened them forever,
yeah,
have the base knowledge.
yes.
Just real quick, Robert, so I'm assuming after talking to some folks from the county that the impetus on this is kind of stemming from the cap? and the financial. So could you just kind of walk us through the trigger on this and the movement on it? Meaning like the judge is saying, like, we're moving now on these things for these restrictions because I understand that's something to do with the economics of the county and things that have happened in the state.
Yeah, yes, I would largely agree with that, that the recognizing that our revenues are going to be limited, and with the cap that incentives for all of the good that they do, that is we survive on property taxes. I mean, that's where we get the vast majority of our revenue, and that is the core of it, and obviously trying to balance that with what Commissioner Pepcorn just talked about of realizing what the value of incentives are, and walking that tightrope as an organization.
And Robert, I appreciate you being here, and I know you're in a little bit of a tough spot when we're asking you to speak for the Cass County Commission, but I will speak for counties. So they are much more impacted by this cap than the city of Fargo. To give you an example, we have water fees, we have mosquito fees, we have all these fees. The county has zero. And so when you get a cap from the state, that cap is much more, that cap fits a lot more snugly on the county than it does on the city. Imagine the city with, I should have brought one of those giant baseball caps because it's a lot tighter for the, anyway, so if you want to talk a little bit about that.
I would agree with you. Mr. Redlinger and I always have some interesting conversations of budgets and looking at the different uniquenesses. But as you say, we are really dependent on the property taxes, and so recognizing where the growth in income and development of a community comes, and wanting to recognize that, and recognizing obviously the pinch points of low-income housing, but also realizing that when it comes to developments that would otherwise be coming or likely coming, regardless of existence or non-existence of an incentive, I think there was an intent there to just be a little tighter.
Well, and Robert, that's kind of my point here, is the opposition to these incentives is always based on the project will come whether or not we provide incentives or not. And that's the uncertainty as you back away from these, that projects don't even get considered given the policies of the city. And so this argument that we're forcing others to pay property taxes while providing incentives is no, this project isn't going to exist without that incentive, and this community is going to look different because of it. And so I think we've been very, very careful that we look at projects and say, what's the repayment of them? And that's where we're seeing the returns from these type of policies. And so I would always sort of challenge that we want to, yes, we want to be very careful and make sure we aren't over incentivizing, but at the same time, if we pull back from it and we are not even considered for these type of projects, we're going to start to have some tremendously difficult decisions then going forward as we try to solve these issues.
Very good. Unless there's any more discussion, we'll move on to number 4, the incentives reporting. Jim, will you get us started with that?
So Commissioner Strand put this item on the City Commission agenda a couple weeks ago, and I think he's really looking more at going forward. How are we going to monitor these job creation, primary sector projects? That long recommended motion wasn't approved. It was more just to refer this to your committee and take a look at how we could monitor these maybe more appropriately. We looked at the development incentive agreement that we have everyone sign, and it's a state form, and it probably could be a lot clearer in terms of what the follow-up is going to be. So I'm going to work with Eric Johnson to come up with a draft of, incentive policy that the business would sign. This probably spells it out a little bit more, how often you report, what's the consequences if you don't create the jobs in the first 2 years. I think some of the reporting we had in the past that was presented to you looked at job creation over about 5 years, but really our incentive form really only required the first 2 years. So there are a few businesses that looked like they weren't in compliance that actually were, because they had met the job requirements for the first 2 years. And we're continuing to follow up on those. I think one company saw their name in the paper and said, we didn't know we were supposed to report something. What do we do? And so we'll follow up with them. And in talking to them on the phone, I think they had committed to create, like 40 jobs, and they'd created 100. And so a lot of these create more than we required. We just didn't get it in the report. So we'll continue to monitor those, and I think we'll try to clean up that agreement so it's a little simpler for the city to follow as well as the business.
The other thing that happened was we're trying to work with the EDC, because the EDC already has, already have required reporting for them. So instead of having duplication, we wanted to work with them. And so basically this last year was our first attempt. Wouldn't you say, Jim, that for us to try to get these reports, and basically we only had 2 companies that did not participate. And so it's a work in progress, and I do think we can resolve this. And the simplest way is just say, if you don't report, then you don't get the incentive. So it's easily fixed, and our new city attorney is here. We'll figure out some way to, but we had really good participation. But of course, it's important for us to monitor to make sure that what we're doing is effective. So I think it's a good point. And so if you want to add to that, go ahead, Jim, and anyone else.
Yeah, the EDC, I don't think they're online, but they're doing this business retention.
I'm online, Jim.
Okay, maybe you can talk about the business retention visits that you're already doing. And so it's easy to collect this when you're already doing those visits. Joe, if you want to address that.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity to weigh in on this. And I think the other conversations that preceded it sort of connect a lot and align a lot of the discussions that are being had. At first, I just say, the work that the city has done and our team has done at the EDC is something that should be maybe not celebrated, but at least recognized, that the community's leaders want to stay on top of these relationships between the companies and the city and the investments that the city's making. Sometimes that gets overlooked. But I don't know of another city, at least in the upper Midwest, that is doing this to the level that Fargo's doing this in the relationship with the EDC. So just wanted to put that out there first. We do BR&E, or business retention expansion interviews, and strategic communications. I think we'll have over 150 this year across the region, and a majority of those are Fargo-based companies. As you all know, we've set up our system to allow for us to send surveys out to these companies ahead of when the reporting time is due. As Commissioner Pepcorn said, this is a new process, so we're all learning as we go along, and to have that kind of return of information, and even what Jim is saying, how that can maybe be cleaned up and understood a little bit more, both in terms of our understanding as the EDC, the city, and the companies. I think we're going to get there. So I think we've had a great first step. And lastly, I think, we put in this report, and it's noted the kind of return that the relationship that the city has had with these nearly 20 companies and probably 24 projects over the last several years. I think it's just a strong indication of the value of strategic investments. Yes, you can incentivize everything, or you can incentivize nothing. And I think either one of those are easy strategies, but I think the results usually don't pay off very well. So what we're doing here, I think, is very strategic. And from my perspective, doing this for 3 decades in 4 different states, I think this is a really solid process that we've all put together, and will just improve as time goes on. So I'd be happy to answer any of the questions from the committee related to this.
Any questions?
So I think Commissioner Strand was concerned about the fact that 3 companies didn't report back to us and kind of wanted that to happen. And to Jim's point, it was about the amount of jobs done, but if we saw that report, the wages were higher than we expected to come back. I think if Ian's going to do a policy, what would be for the company to come to explain themselves rather than he's looking for a clawback automatically. I think the company has the ability to come back to us. And I don't think the economy, right, goes up or down 2-3 years. You may not have the same results as you thought you'd have, but I think in courtesy to the company, you should allow them to come back into this body and say, here's what went on and here's what happens. And then EDC, we decide if we're going to do a clawback or do something else. So Ian, what I'd like to have is kind of, you know, it's like that verbal warning here, we got an issue, let's work it out. And I think that's what he's really requesting is going forward, let's have a policy so people, one, report, and two, if they said they were going to do something, let's see if they did it. And if they didn't do it, what happened? And to your point, Jim, they were supposed to do 50 jobs, they did 100 jobs. Well, they look bad in the paper, but they actually were doing good work. So I don't like to embarrass the company if it is doing well for us, but if we could, Joe, tighten that up so we don't have this problem of, oh, 3 companies didn't report, so they're not being responsive, but a lot of times went to somebody's desk and they didn't report. I mean, I can't tell you the many letters I get asking me to do a report, and it's like, which department do I take this to? But usually it's yours, Jim.
And Mayor, if I could, to your comments, I think that's exactly right, that it's sort of starting to have the conversation earlier and understanding the dynamics of these projects and working with the staff. Again, this is a contractual relationship between the community and the companies. We're just trying to play a role where we could be helpful using our technology and our systems and our outreach and working with Jim and the team and the committee so that these things can be addressed and made known. But if there are challenges, as you said, Mayor, what are they and how do we overcome those? Maybe it's the company's posting dozens of jobs and it doesn't have those positions to fill those. So how do we deal with that when that type of circumstance comes up, or they've exceeded jobs, or their property taxes are far in excess of what we thought they would be? And I think that report shows that the value of the properties and the taxes to the community and the taxing bodies is probably about 3 times what it was before these projects started. So that's all, I think, good news.
Our current policy, and I think we should keep this the same, talked about if someone's not meeting the requirement, we come back to this committee first, because is it something with the economy? Is it something where they automated, so now they have less people, but they're paying them a lot more because things are automated? There's all sorts of circumstances, and so yeah, I think it's important that we come back to this committee, explain it first rather than have some automatic termination.
Any other comments? I think that sounds like an excellent idea. And so maybe you can, at our next meeting, just give a summary of what you have in mind. If
Okay.
that's okay. Is that okay with everybody? Okay. If there's anything else to add, last item on the agenda is commercial redevelopment policy amendment. Jim.
We've talked about this at several meetings, and so I guess last time you had asked me to try to get a few more details in on kind of what we were talking about. And so this would be for where we're trying to encourage more infill by, trying to encourage someone to take maybe an older, less dense office park and you turn it into a mixed use, something maybe similar to the block project on South University where you have housing above it. So you go from a very low density, low value per square foot to a much higher density building. And so we would, take a look at these. We'd probably still use a but-for test. The maximum, incentive would be 10 years. But as far as like the higher value, we would probably take a look at what's the value per square foot and the floor area ratio of the site, compared to other commercial areas in town. If it's just going to be similar to what's happening around town anyway, that probably doesn't justify an incentive. Are there opportunities for economic development? Maybe it's you don't have companies, but it's a type of space where you're going to have more incubators or space. So the EDCI is identified as needed in the community. And then in terms of shared parking, we find anytime you can share parking, you can get a lot more density. And so a little more specifics on that. The other things were the same. I guess I'm ready to see if you're ready to take this to city commission and see if they'd want to incorporate this into our overall policy. Sort of one of the projects that's been looking at this, of course, is the Roars redevelopment on 45th Street, where they have an office building there that's, I think, has real high vacancy, and they're looking at trying to upgrade the quality of that space as well as add apartments to the site. And so I think that's probably a pending application, but I can think of other, commercial buildings or commercial areas in town where they're probably more appropriate for redevelopment, and some incentive like this might move it along so we get higher value in the long term rather than, continued diminishment of the value of the property.
So if I could add real quick, I do support this, and especially where you break out, we're redoing the land development code, and some of these things are things that would be evaluated to make sure they're in the new land development code. And so to me, that's part of the assessment, to make sure that that's compatible, because before, the other thing is, I mean, like with now some of the requirements for the incentives for the county or for the school or whatever, these might not be eligible. So that's just another thing to think about. Go ahead.
So obviously, the land development code's currently in production.
Yep.
Is, with the understanding that we have now, is this in line with the intent of the land development code as it sits, the new one?
I mean, I think they will be in alignment. Really, this is in alignment with the Go 2030, plan where we want more density.
Yep.
I think this is perfectly aligned with that. If we just adopt a plan and say we'd like more density, please, and there's no incentive for people to do that. This can kind of help move us forward, where we try to get more redevelopment within the city versus it all happening on the edge of town.
Yep.
We're doing some of that now with TIFs and pilots, but this would kind of broaden it out a little bit. I think the new land development code will kind of work together with this in terms of, well, what's consistent with city plans and land uses. So the land development code will then regulate what it's going to look like, what's the form and all that. And this talks more about the need for an incentive. So they really will work together.
That's helpful. Thanks, Jim. I'm curious, is there going to be some type of an incentive review upon completion of the code, or how are we as a committee thinking about the new code and how it pertains to our incentives?
Well, I think once it gets all done, we'll have the planning department come and give us a kind of because that all goes together, because we've talked about that since the beginning. But I would say, to give you in this specific example, we were having an outside group help us with our land development code. We'd have them review this to make sure that this is what we're trying to accomplish before we would approve. Yep. Does that make sense to you?
It does. I'm curious, is that within the scope of work of the current consulting group?
Yes, it is.
To review our incentives?
I don't want to put the planning department, that we have a representative here.
You answered pretty quickly.
I don't want to put her on the spot, but this, to give this specific example, would be reviewed by them before it would come to us, because that's what we're doing right now, and we want it to make sure it's compatible. Yes. And so, but that was the original discussion. Incentives have to go with. We all have to be working on the same thing. Yep. Do you know, if we were given incentives that didn't agree, then that would make sense. So,
agreed.
Go ahead, Jim. If I'm rambling too much, I apologize.
Yeah, and I haven't gotten into the details of the land development code. I'm kind of waiting for the actual language before I can kind of comment on it, because I think right now, they're not really close to any kind of a final language. But it is going to encourage more infill, more mixed use. It's going to be also into the form and the design of the space.
So part of the land development code is they do nodes of areas in the city where they think something should happen, and part of it is what to do with all the either office space or warehouse space that's not being utilized. So this is a new concept to take some office space, reconvert it into apartments, and that's what we're trying to do. What Jim's relating is most of what Dave and I heard from the land development code people is density, 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 because we have a limited footprint. So whenever you do any redevelopment in infill, try to figure out if you can add density to that with your build. And then Jim brings in parking. So a lot of times when you look South Fargo Veterans Boulevard, you see all those little shopping centers with parking. Question would be, did we ask for too much parking? Because if you build in the future, now you're seeing some stuff on 52nd, where you see that 52nd, some smaller like little condos, you see less parking. You see, so now we're trying to develop things of that. God, you don't have to have all the parking all the time. But land development code would say if you're gonna ever do any mix and do the parking, so for you to know or know, we just did a parking study. NP Avenue just had another garage. We found out that our parking only consumes 50% of what we've developed already. So we have a lot of capacity because of how it was built. And John can remember all the arguments we had about parking downtown. But that's where we're thinking what Dave's right is. I mean, Dave's big contention is diversion's coming, we get the diversion, we have limited space. So everything we want to incentivize in the community should think about density, and does it fit, is it an isolated commercial space that if we kind of look with a jaundiced eye, it'll never make it. I mean, you just know it's going to die, right? But what's a new thing right now? Service stations? And they're going up all over. It's either a car wash or a service station. Everybody would like, but you know, how much a car wash, how much does that really help on your economic twirl? Maybe you do want a gas station with a car wash, but not a car wash solo. So those are the things Jim's trying to say, it has to go with LDC.
When you look at some of the last bullets, you talk about desirable land uses and consistent with city plans. Well, that land development code may identify certain nodes where they want higher density, and other areas where maybe that's not as important. So we would be more supportive of projects there where that's been mapped out than if it's not. It's not mapped out yet, but it will be.
Good conversation. I don't know, did you want us, is there something, or is this just for initial round, or what do you have in mind, Jim?
Yeah, I had in mind actually recommending approval to the city commission. I'm going to have one last pass with planning to see if they have any comments on this.
Move to approve.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second the motion.
Motion and a second. Any other further discussion? I would say, and so thank everybody for coming, but I also would say what the project that we just approved, that's a lot of density.
Yep.
And so we're actually, that accomplished, obviously it's workforce housing, but that's the same, it's a lot of density in an area where that's what we're trying to do. And so in a way, we're kind of accomplishing a lot of things. So any other comments? Otherwise, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. That is everything on our agenda. Thank you, everybody, for coming this afternoon, and we are adjourned.